we got to do this different. This is the equivalent of like when you're in math class and you have a paper and pencil and somebody gives you a calculator, or like, before Google existed, now you want to know something, you type it into Google or Bing or whatever. And so we think that this technology, our application of AI, is going to revolutionize the way that records are reviewed within veterinary medicine.
Welcome to the Conversations on Applied AI podcast, where Justin Grammans and the team at Emerging Technologies North talk with experts in the fields of artificial intelligence and deep learning. In each episode, we cut through the hype and dive into how these technologies are being applied to real-world problems today. We hope that you find this episode educational and applicable to your industry, and connect with us to learn more about our organization at appliedai.mn. Enjoy.
Welcome, everyone, to the Conversations on Applied AI podcast. Today, we're talking with Scott Brown. Scott is a business-focused senior technology executive with 25 years of experience in transforming organizations, solving complex problems, and building globally distributed systems. He drives cross-functional strategy development, continuous improvement, and is committed to growing talent and developing the next generation of leaders. He is currently the CEO of Transfer. Transfer makes it easy to request, send, manage, and review veterinary medical records. Unlike other solutions in the market, Transfer leverages many advanced technologies, like artificial intelligence, to extract, analyze, and present clinically relevant information from an animal's medical records with no software to install. Scott holds a BS in aerospace engineering and is a mentor at the Minnesota Emerging Software Advisory, where he provides C-level pro bono mentoring to emerging software companies. Thanks, Scott, for being on the program today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Great. Well, you're speaking our language when you're talking about artificial intelligence. Maybe you can give us a little bit more context, I guess, in terms of where you got to where you are today.
I began my career in technology, like you said, over 25 years ago. It was a very different world back then. All my projects were client-server based. I began working at Accenture, installing PeopleSoft, which is an ERP system or enterprise resource planning. And that was back in the day when large companies didn't have automation to manage their back office systems or back office processes. And so I look back on that. I don't know if you remember the Y2K bug, but everybody's worried about the year going from 1999 to 2000, and people were predicting the end of the world. And that was really before the internet, before the proliferation of the internet. And you started to have this .com boom around that time. And so it was a very different world. From there, I moved into e-commerce, worked at Digital River for a few years, and then spent years at Medtronic, building out their connected care system. Accenture, client-server-based technology, and then web-based technology at Digital River and Medtronic. And then at Medtronic, it kind of shifted from web-based technology to a mobile-based technology. And with a connected care system, we were remotely monitoring patients. So patients with implantable devices could continue to see their doctors. Our use case was an older adult with a heart condition. They get an implantable device. They lived in Minnesota, but then they would winter in Florida, and they wanted to see their doctor. So they could go down to Florida during the winter, interrogate their device. The doctor could get the data, continue to provide care remotely, 1,000 miles away. So, and then at XRS, transforming the company from a hardware-based system to mobile. And since then, a lot of what I've done has been focused on mobile. And then most recently, my experience has kind of shifted towards artificial intelligence. So at Revelix, we were using computer vision and artificial intelligence to prevent diabetic limb complications. So looking at the bottoms of feet, particularly with diabetics who had peripheral neuropathy, which meant they couldn't feel their foot. And we could look at the thermal imaging of their feet and determine if a wound was about to form. Since they couldn't feel their feet, you and I can feel if we're wearing a hole in our foot. But if you have peripheral neuropathy, you get these hot spots, and you could walk over your foot, and all of a sudden you take off your sock and there's blood there. And so the computer vision was able to look at the thermal patterns, like identify the foot, look at the thermal patterns, and we could tell before it became an issue. It's a multi-billion-dollar problem within healthcare for a patient. If you're able to prevent that, you're talking thousands of dollars. If they get a wound on their foot, it becomes very hard to treat because they can't feel it and they keep re-injuring it. And ultimately, it leads to an amputation. And so amputation costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. So if you can prevent it early on, you can save tremendous money in the healthcare system. So, and now working on transfer, where we are taking veterinary records, extracting all the clinical content from those records. So the thing about veterinary medicine is that you don't have HIPAA and you also don't have interoperability standards like HL7. So a lot of the information is shared through PDFs. And the problem with PDFs is to review them, they're hard to search. It's a document. And so kind of reviewing that. And if you have an older sick animal and you're trying to see the animal in an emergency situation, or even the non-billable time, after hours when you're preparing for a visit, it takes a long time.
Sure.
And what we're working on is being able to extract that content, understand the presenting complaint or the reason for visit, and then pulling out just the necessary information, which is referred to as the pertinent history. So the veterinarians will receive the appropriate information just in time for that visit.
Wow, that sounds huge. And I think, I guess I don't even know what the population of the animal, like the animal population in the United States, but it's got to be huge. There's got to be a massive number of animals.
The pandemic has driven a lot of adoption of animals. Here locally in Minneapolis, I don't know if you saw, but just before Christmas time, they ran out of animals at the animal shelter. And so they wrote on their Facebook page, on the door, and then they posted on their Facebook page, but they're like, don't even come in. We don't have any more animals left. Within the United States, the households with animals went up from 67% to 70%. And there are about 70 million dogs and about 66 million cats within the United States. There has been just unprecedented demand within the veterinary space because of that. So you have this increase in animal ownership. And then with COVID, you have all these preventive procedures in place to be able to sterilize the room and people waiting in their cars and more time in between patients. So you have this decrease in efficiency. So the demand within the veterinary space is absolutely unprecedented. I recently got a puppy. And so I called my local vet to get him in for a wellness check. And I had to schedule 3 months out.
Really?
Yeah, it's crazy to be able to get in. So they're looking for every way to be more efficient. So when you look at like a veterinary specialist, the veterinary specialist isn't familiar with your animal. So your animal goes to like a primary. So like you go to a primary doctor, you have to have surgery. You would go to like an orthopedic surgeon. It's the same thing in the animal space. You'd go to an orthopedic surgeon, you go to an oncologist, so on. That doctor isn't familiar with your animal. So the records have to be transferred. So when they transfer the records, they send a PDF. And so if you have an older sick animal, that can be 100 plus pages to review. All that review is non-billable time. So they get paid. So what we'd consider procedural care within veterinary medicine. And it's typically paid by the owner. So when your animal goes in, you send them the records. The vet spends 20 to 30 minutes looking through it, preparing for that evaluation. That's all time they don't get paid for. They're just expected to know this. So in a specialty practice, 60+% of their business is going to be referral. So that means they're spending about 2 to 3 hours per day, typically from their free time, reviewing these records, preparing for the next day's visit. And this is time they don't get paid for. It impacts their quality of life. And my other 2 co-founders are veterinary students, and they grew up with 2 veterinary parents who are both surgeons themselves. And so they saw a lot of missed opportunities, missed dinners, and just a lot of time spent at work that could have been spent, at home, kind of enjoying each other. And so here when they got to vet school, they're like, there has to be a different way. There has to be a better way. We've got to be different. They had submitted their idea to the Tech Transfer Center at the University of Wisconsin, which is WARF. They had formed this venture studio called Varsity Venture Studio. And their concept was the first one selected for funding and for launch through the program. And I joined in July to help them organize and to create a business around this concept.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I was going to ask you sort of how long have you been at the company and where did the idea come from? So it sort of came out of a personal pain point, I guess, right? From people that are veterinaries in the space.
Yeah. So all my background is healthcare technology. I've been building teams and scaling systems and, really focused on technology. My other two co-founders are very deep in the veterinary space. And I think our skills and our experience complement each other very well. So they grew up with veterinary parents and they've been around animals their entire lives. They've helped their parents review records. They've helped their parents with their practice. And so when they went to veterinary school, they lived in this world. They understood it intimately. And so here, this is very personal to them. And so when they got to school, they're like, we got to do this different. This is the equivalent of like when you're in math class and you have a paper and pencil and somebody gives you a calculator, or like, before Google existed, think about how you found information. You'd ask
Went to the library.
Went to the library. Now you want to know something, you type it into Google or Bing or whatever. And so we think that this technology, our application of AI, is going to revolutionize the way that records are reviewed within veterinary vets.
Absolutely. It sounds like it. I mean, if it's a huge time saver, it feels like that's a ripe opportunity for applying artificial intelligence, right? I mean, who likes to do all the mundane work?
Well, you think about it. So you go to work, let's say you work 8 hours a day. Then let's say you have 3 hours of homework each night that you don't get paid for, right? You don't get paid for that. You get paid to do your job, but then you're expected to be able to do all these other things. So if I came to you with a solution and said, hey, you could get back most of that time, I think most people would take that. You say, hey, we're going to cut that 3 hours down to 30 minutes. 30 minutes is a lot more manageable than spending 3 hours a day reviewing records.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, you're not even getting paid for it. So it's just sort of, it is purely wasted time. I was going to delve in a little bit. It's kind of a question off the cuff here, but having non-technical co-founders, do sometimes you get the sense that, I don't even know how to phrase this per se, but there's a lot of hype around AI, right? And so people are like, well, geez, it should be able to just plug some data in and I should be able to get the answer pretty quickly, huh? Again, there's a lot of stories around AI doing some amazing things. But a lot of it is hype, right? A lot of it isn't really, we're still very, very far away from this general artificial intelligence, right? It's very, very narrow space stuff. Have you seen that? Again, I don't want to pick on your co-founders or anything like that, but do you sense that, I guess, in people that you talk with? Maybe they think it's too easy, too hard, or don't have a grasp of where we are in this space?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. My co-founders are very deep in the veterinary space. Right. So when it comes to defining the problems, understanding the market, they are intimately involved in this. So they didn't say, hey, we should apply AI to this. And we need to find AI. We have this solution. We need to find a way to apply this. It was very much the other way around. And they understood the market. They understood the need. They had some concepts on how to address this. They knew what needed to be done. They didn't know how it would get done. And so they said, look, all the information's there. We know what we're looking for. There's got to be a way to marry these together to present these results to us, right? We can go into Google and type a word and get the results back. We can take, we've got search. We understand clinically what we're looking for. We understand, we want to know the health history of this animal. Is this animal even healthy enough for surgery? Okay, now once we understand that, when did these concerns present themselves? How long has it been happening? What else have they tried? Right? These are all normal questions. So they understand it clinically. And that's not my area of expertise.
Sure.
Right? I think that's technology. And I always say a problem well defined is a problem half solved. And what they were able to do was clearly define this problem, clearly understand what needed to be done. And so in a clinical setting, they say, this is how we operate. This is what we get. This is what we want. And so for me to come in to this clearly defined problem and understand how it's going to be used, well, now I can apply a solution. So when we originally talked, we weren't thinking AI.
Yeah.
Right? Originally when we talked, we said, hey, we have this, all we wanted to be able to do is search on the content that's in here. And as I got into this and said, well, we want to know this, and this is related to this. And if these things are this, then we want to do this. And understanding kind of that, the logic and the concept, it was too complex to write an algorithm around. but there were a lot of patterns. Based on that, I said, this is a great application for AI. So now, technically, we want to be able to extract that content. We want to search it, filter it, work with it, and so on. And as we get the content and as we work with these different presenting complaints or reasons for visit, and we understand how it's being used, we can continue to improve the system. And being able to write logic around that would be next to impossible. And we know that that's our ultimate goal. This is the information we want, and we want it just in time. So if this is the presenting complaint, this is what we're looking for. So tell me if you find this in the record. And so just being able to take that and make it searchable is pretty easy. But then there's all the manual effort of being able to search through that. So being able to apply the AI models to extract that, kind of take one step further to be able to extract it based on that presenting complaint, we think is a real differentiator in the market. And so that's where I came in. And I think, like I said before, we've got complementary skills.
For sure. I mean, a startup that I'm involved in is called Captivation. Kind of similar to you, I have a co-founder that is a subject matter expert. And he's an expert in presentation skills, leadership training, coaching. And he came to me saying, hey, I'm reviewing all this video of people as they present. And how can I, again, for your point, I'm sitting here with a pencil and a piece of paper when we should be using a calculator for this. And so we sort of started the journey of allowing people to record their presentations without actually needing to have a teacher there, but now they can start getting data about it, right? So are you looking at the camera or not? Are you saying ums and ahs a lot? What sort of vocabulary words are you using? Or is it uplifting, or is it, down and detrimental? And all these other types of things. So if you just slow down, your presentation skills get better. And so, yeah, I was kind of in that same situation. I just wanted to, pick your brain a little bit on that. But yeah, he basically had a problem, and it was more or less like you. He's like, I'm spending a lot of time here doing stuff that we should have technology be able to solve it. Not saying AI or machine learning or any of that stuff was the right answer, but there's just a lot of wasted time. So it definitely feels good to pair up with people like that know the industry. And then I think, as a technologist, I've been doing this, writing software and code, since the mid to late 90s. So I remember, PeopleSoft and all that other stuff, those early days. But it feels good to actually be able to actually apply technology and solve the world's problems in whatever way you can.
Yeah, I think in a lot of these problems, you need collaboration. You need the subject matter expert, and you need someone who's done this before, built these systems and solved these problems technically. So you've got a solution for a real problem that exists. And I think that within healthcare, you have a lot of people with good intent. You have patients who want to help, right? They see a problem and they want to help, but they don't necessarily understand the healthcare system or how care is delivered and so on. So, within the healthcare space, I think it's critical to have a clinician involved. And so, at Hypnosis, we had a chief medical officer, we had a chief informatics officer, we had a very strong clinical team. And typically they would come in and, close the deal. They were the credibility of the company. It's the same thing here. The veterinarians aren't responding to me. Even though I'm the CEO, they're responding to my two co-founders who are vet students, right? They reach out peer to peer, and when they have questions about how things work, they're in they're peers. And I think that's critical. So if I were to try to solve this problem by myself, it wouldn't work, right? You need that subject matter expertise. And even though I own a dog and I may be a pet owner, it's very different actually providing care and working in that system and understanding the practice management system and understanding the medical records and how exams are done, things like that. You need the subject matter expertise, and then you also need the expertise around how to build and scale systems. What do we need to do? And then how do we need to do it? I think that's where having a successful team brings both those components together.
Well, it sounds like you have a really good worldly view of how to build software, which kind of leads into your experience working as a mentor as well, too, right?
Yeah.
At Mesa?
Yeah.
I forget how they pronounce that. MESA.
Yeah, Mesa. Yeah.
Mesa, yeah. Are you working with any other companies right now? Well, Hypnosis, right? I guess. Are you a mentor to them? Or were you
No,
there? Or?
no, I
No.
worked
Okay.
with Citylexis, but was the mentor there. So
Gotcha.
Omnia Fishing, so
Oh,
Matt,
that's who it is. Yeah.
they're doing amazing things. Matt is a great leader. If you're into fishing, check out Omnia. They are doing very cool stuff. So Matt's previous company was analyzing lakes. And so through these lakes, he could understand like the species and what was working and so on. And they sold that company. I don't remember to who, but some large fishing company, but they had all this data, all the analytics on the fishing data and stuff like that. It's all publicly available data, and they aggregated it and made it available. And so now you can pick a lake in the United States. They'll tell you what species is there. They'll tell you what fishing lure to use. They'll sell you the tackle and the rods and all that. And so you want to go up north fishing and have a good time, they'll tell you what's working. They've got people out there. They have a whole social aspect where you can put in your fishing reports, talk about the lures, make recommendations. It's very cool. Huge fan of Matt, huge fan of Omnia. I'm really happy to be their mentor. Yeah, they're doing super cool things.
Cool. Yeah, no, they've been a little bit of a success story here. I've been seeing them grow over the years, and they raised a bunch of money. Is that true as well?
Yeah, they put in a ton of work. They're doing a great job, just knocking it out of the park. And I think they have so much potential. Like they have these huge players coming in, courting them. Last summer, they gave away a boat. They've got these phenomenal promotions going on. So again, if you're a fisherman, even if you're not, so I fish maybe once or twice a year. And so when I go, I want to catch something and I want to have a good time. And I have no idea what I'm doing. I grab my rod and go. And, with Omnia, you can pick the lake that you're going to. You can see what's working, get bait, increase your chances of catching something. And so, for a part-time fisherman like me, it's a perfect solution.
For sure. Yeah, I had to connect the dots. I actually worked with Dan Wick many, many years ago, back when he was at a company called Red Stamp. So yeah, he looks like I knew he was one of the C's over there. It looks like he's the CTO. So it's been good. Really good. And actually, speaking of funding, I mean, how are you guys funded? You kind of came out of this incubator?
So technically it was a venture studio as opposed to an incubator. So the difference is that, a venture studio, Varsity Venture Studio is a collaboration between WARF, which would be the Tech Transfer Center at the University of Wisconsin, and High Alpha. And so High Alpha is a venture studio. So High Alpha Innovations works with companies and universities to build venture studios. What WARF saw was that they had all these concepts and ideas with the students. They had IP within the university. They have a massive endowment from IP that they've licensed in the past. And they wanted to support their students and their faculty, more than just licensing IP, but they wanted to support them in, I think, a really forward-looking way. So they created this Varsity Venture Studio, had a call for concepts. And so faculty and students could submit these concepts. And through this process, I think they had 120, 150 different concepts that were submitted. And through High Alpha's process, they were able to work with the students and the faculty on these concepts, narrow it down to about 20 that were promising. Of those 20, they went through some due diligence and some market analysis and so on, and then narrowed that down to a group of about 4 that went through what they call a sprint week. And in this sprint week, they work with the team pretty much 24/7 for a week to look at the competition, to develop the concept, to do the market analysis, to essentially create a pitch based on the business analysis and the opportunity. And from there, they do the report out. And transfer was the first concept that was selected for support through that process. So a venture studio has the tools to be able to curate these ideas or vet these ideas into what has the most potential. And then from there, work with the entity, the business or the university, to then develop the concepts. And then they can choose to fund all of them or to fund one of them or whatever they want to do with it. They don't have a horse in this race, but what their strength is to build businesses. So the strength of the Tech Transfer Center is developing ideas and concepts. The Venture Studio is helping curate and vet and determine the highest potential concepts from that cohort. And then WARF provided funding and launch support. Chi Alpha Innovations has provided resource support as well. And so that's kind of the difference from an incubator. And so that funding we received, we called our pre-seed funding to get us started.
Okay. And you haven't needed to take any more along the way?
Not yet. It'd take us a little while. We just kicked off a bridge round. And so we're just starting to talk with some more investors to raise a little bit more money to get us across the threshold to bring an enterprise product to market.
Yeah, sure. Are you guys hiring today?
Well, we're looking at a few strategic hires. So we're looking at reinforcing our clinical ranks. So we've been talking with some veterinarians. So potentially bringing on a chief veterinary officer. And so we've got a few opportunities that we're looking at to really reinforce our clinical credibility, to understand the clinical use cases, help develop the product, and so on.
Cool. I'll have liner notes and stuff like that as a part of all the podcasts. So I'll be sure to include links to you guys.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And this Varsity Venture, so is this out of Wisconsin? So it's not local here, right?
Yeah, so that's in Madison. It was spun out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And so Varsity Venture Studio is part of the university. It's part of WARF Ventures in Madison.
Yeah, I don't know if there's other, there's a company called Great North Labs, if you're familiar at all here, and it feels like we could do better here in the Twin Cities around some of this stuff. I'm not sure if you know of very, very, very many. There's also another guy named Nick Tietz here in the cities. He runs a thing called ILT Studios. It's very similar to that. But again, what you are reminding me of is people have these great ideas and they need mentorship, right? They need help. And you could sit there and do startup week or startup weekend and stuff like that all day long. But you need a venture company to come in and actually say that is a product that can actually go to market, right? And they're experienced with it, so they you can kind of weed out a lot of these other ones, and then sort of put all your resources behind the one that you think is going to have the most impact. For you guys, you were talking, my mind initially went to pets, but I'm guessing there's just general farm animals that might be able to be benefited from this technology, right?
Our products are targeted at what they refer to as companion animals, so dogs and cats. So if you have an iguana or a parrot, that'd be an exotic animal. You have a rhinoceros or a zebra, that would be a zoology or, an animal at a zoo. And then there are large animals like cows, horses, things like that. So they're managed in very different ways. So you manage a herd of large animals. So you have a lot of cows or a lot of horses. You have food producing animals, pigs. And so those are managed in very different ways. So if you have a dog that breaks his leg, you want that dog to heal and to get better. And so you're going to look for care, find a way to get that animal out of pain. That's not necessarily the case in other categories of animals. They're food producing. Maybe you make food out of them rather than fix them. And so there's different ways to approach it. So we're targeting the companion animal space. So again, kind of dogs and cats and the animals that you have around your house, and kind of the small animal veterinarians and specifically the specialists. So surgery, oncology, neurology, internal medicine.
Makes sense. With the population numbers that you're telling me, you still have a huge amount of animals you can deal with just only focusing on that area. And it's also probably the high dollar ones too. Like you said, if a cow has cancer, they're not going to do anything about it.
It may not. That's not really the space that we're focused on, because they provide care in a different ways. You immunize the herd, and you will provide care to the herd, and so on. And so it's not kind of the individual medicine that you practice with companion animals. They're also with the herds. Typically, it's a company as opposed to a pet owner.
Well, one of the questions I do like to ask people is, and I think you've touched on it a fair amount, but how do you define artificial intelligence?
I think of artificial intelligence as a system being aware of its surroundings, being able to assess and then use probability to achieve a goal. So being able to create these models where it recognizes its situation or its surroundings, understands different options, then picks the best approach to do something, to achieve a goal, to be able to accomplish a task, and so on. Where an algorithm will if-then statements and kind of like a decision tree to be able to get to the point. I think what we're trying to do, we're taking very complex logic and, which would be too difficult to program, and understanding all these nuances and interactions, and then being able to extract that and then present all that's necessary. We're using natural language processing, which is essentially extracting the text and then applying natural language understanding. So you can take that text and then understand the context of it, to put meaning behind it, understand, not just the terms, but the context of those terms, and then understanding the meaning of that, and then extracting or creating that executive summary.
Are you guys building your own NLP models and everything? Is there stuff you can use that's already pre-built, stuff off the shelf? Or are you kind of really starting from ground zero?
Yeah. And, there are a lot of tools out there today, it's constantly developing, but we use as much as we can off the shelf. We do a lot of experimentation with different models and different tools. When we began, we tried a couple different tech stacks to find good results, good processing times. This last week, we applied a new model, and it completely crushed the servers. And it most times, the results went way up and just crushed the servers. And so you don't know until you try. And so now we know. And so, ways to optimize the models. We look for, we can always throw more hardware at it. But in my experience, even at Revealix, we began with some assumptions. And, there are things like TensorFlow, right? They've been out there for a long time, had a lot of tools, a lot of usage. It didn't work for us. It worked fine, but there are a couple other things that we used that we got 10x the performance, 10x the results, and they're easier to train. They're more responsive. There are a lot of resources that I follow just to kind of stay on top of things. And so I think the first thing is just to understand your use case. Like, what problem are you trying to solve? Like, what are you trying to do? Tons of tools out there, lots of open source stuff, new tools and models coming out all the time. And I think the first thing is to understand your problem and then evaluate the solutions that are out there and then try a couple of them, see how they work.
That's awesome. No, that's great. That's great advice, because otherwise you're basically a hammer walking around looking for a nail, right? Yeah. You're starting with the technology first, and you really need to understand the other side of it. Yeah, I just got a couple more questions here as we start to maybe think about winding down. But I mean, as you think back 20 some years or so, like, what are some advice you would give to people, whether it be getting into the AI space or technology in general? Are there classes that you've seen or books or conferences or places that you've found as people are exploring new things in technology?
Like I said at the beginning, my career began in client server, then moved into web, and then moved to mobile, and now into AI. I think everything is going to be AI. AI is going to be absolutely everywhere. 10, 15 years ago, it was hard to get your hands on AI tools, right? The processing time, building models, universities and large companies had access to that, but not kind of everyday programmers. You look at the capabilities that are in AWS and Google and IBM and Microsoft, it's incredible. And so very powerful tools. I would say that any programmer out there that doesn't have experience in AI, pick up a project, find something to work on. I think it's going to be in every aspect of our life. I've always been curious and love solving problems and kind of diving into these things. And so if you go out, there are a lot of resources out there where you can find projects. For example, like if you're an AWS user, they have Deep Lens, which is their little camera with artificial intelligence. And they have a couple projects out there to do. And one of them, I don't know if it's still out there, but one of the projects was with Deep Lens, you could train it to recognize your car. So when you pull in the driveway, it recognizes your car that opens the garage door. Cool. So if you want a place to begin, they've got some really cool tools. It's practical. You can use it. So that's kind of a fun way to begin. I think one of the other projects they had was, hot dog or not a hot dog.
Right. Yes. From the Silicon Valley.
Exactly. And so there are things like that. So Mark Cuban, I don't know if he founded this or if he supports it, but he has this group called AI for Anyone. It's like a biweekly newsletter, but it starts at the ground level. So if you're interested in AI and you have no concept where to begin, follow their newsletter. They've got events. They talk about all these different applications, different tools, different ways that it's being applied. And I think it's a great on-ramp to artificial intelligence. Before you even get into using PyTorch and Detectron and TensorFlow and things like that. So.
Yeah, there's a project out there called Teachable Machine. Are you familiar with that? It's a website you can go to. I'll put a link to it in the notes, but it is like computer vision. Well, it does audio as well. Learning 101. So basically, it's all browser based. So you go in your browser. You can do whatever you want, but then it allows you to basically tag the data, right? So it's like, raise your right hand, raise your right hand, raise your right hand, and you tag a bunch of those, raise your left hand, whatever you want. But it uses your computer camera to do whatever you want, right? So if you wanted to show a picture of a dog or a cat or whatever, you train it. And you can do the same thing with audio, but it generates a model for you. You can actually download it. It's backed by Google, so it's basically a TensorFlow model. And you don't even need to even know programming at all. It's seriously like that simple. And it starts training the concept. Again, it's not unsupervised, it'd be supervised learning, but it's like, hey, this is kind of what it is at its root. And if you want to start playing around with it, all you need is a browser. Really, really fun. Well, how do people get a hold of you, Scott? Are you on LinkedIn, Twitter? Like, what's the best place for people to find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I kind of got off Twitter. There's just too much hatred. I was a huge Twitter user, loved it, but now too much hatred out there. LinkedIn and Instagram. So we've got an Instagram account for transfer. We've just started using that and put some fun stuff out there to kind of entertain people, like creative things for with animals and so on while we're getting ready to launch. I'm on LinkedIn at Project Brown or Scott at transfer.vet. So it's transfer, FUR. And so since I joined Transfer, I spell transfer wrong all the time.
Yeah, that muscle memory.
That's right. But yeah, LinkedIn or Transfer.
I love the name. That's awesome. I mean, did one of the founders come up with it?
Yeah. So through Sprint Week, when they're developing the concept, they're doing the market analysis and they're looking at things. And so one of the things that they do is they name the project. And so they were looking for names that didn't exist in the market, but that applied. And so that was kind of the creative working title, and it stuck since then. I love it. I think it's great. I think it's very creative.
It is really, really good. Really good. Well, cool. Is there any other topic or any other things that you wanted to share at all before we sign off?
I think these discussions are great, kind of getting out in the community and exchanging ideas. There's so much cool stuff that's going on. Like I said, I follow, AI.Google and AI.Facebook, Twitter. All these large tech companies have their engineering blogs, sharing information and sharing their open source code and so on. And so I think it's great that you're doing this. So thanks for having me on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, anytime. And I hope to have you on again in the future. Just to see how you guys have progressed. And again, it seems like an awesome product with a lot of potential and, very, very clear cut. Like here's where we're going after, and here's the value that we're bringing to the market using this new technology. So I wish you guys nothing but the best. I'm sure it's going to be a fun ride here over the next couple of years. I think for all of us in this AI space, there's many applications we haven't even dreamt up yet. So that's what I think is so fun. Every time I have a new person on, I learn something new. So yeah, I hopefully intend to do these conversations around artificial intelligence on this podcast here for many more years, and a chance to meet some really awesome people. So I thank you for being on the show.
You've listened to another episode of the Conversations on Applied AI podcast. We hope you are eager to learn more about applying artificial intelligence and deep learning within your organization. You can visit us at appliedai.mn to keep up to date on our events and connect with our amazing community. Please don't hesitate to reach out to Justin at appliedai.mn if you are interested in participating in a future episode. Thank you for listening.